Welcome you to the new season of World Wave Audio, where we slice through the noise and pull back the curtain on the most complex issues shaping our world.
Have you ever looked at the headlines about the U.S. economy and felt like you were getting two completely different stories?
Oh, absolutely. One day it's booming, the next there are whispers of recession. It's confusing.
Exactly. How do we, as informed citizens and curious learners, make sense of these often contradictory signals? Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics, cut through the noise, and get you well-informed quickly. Today, we're embarking on a crucial deep dive into something that touches all of our lives, the current health and future trajectory of the U.S. economy, and we're putting a special focus on a surprising, often underestimated powerhouse business travel.
That's right. Our mission today is really to cut through that noise, look at the raw data, and understand what's really happening on the ground. We've gathered some truly fascinating sources for you today. Our core material comes from a comprehensive report on business travel's economic impact by the GBTA. That's the Global Business Travel Association. It was just published in June 2024.
Okay, GBTA. Got it.
And alongside that, we've pulled recent economic analyses from reputable news organizations like Al Jazeera and Bloomberg. These give us broader context on, job markets, inflation, GDP, the impacts of various policies.
Picture stuff.
Exactly. And for a pulse on public sentiment and maybe some diverse expert opinions, we'll even dip into a lively discussion thread from Art Economics on Reddit.
Interesting. So a mix of formal reports, news analysis, and public discussion. That sounds like a great foundation. You've shared some incredibly rich material with us, and we're ready to explore the surprising connections between different sectors, decipher the latest job numbers, and even look at how policy decisions are playing out in real time. It's about finding those aha moments, right? Ones that make the big picture click into place, transforming raw data into genuine understanding. So as we embark on this journey together, what stands out to you, our listener, about the current economic discussions? Are you personally seeing a booming economy or perhaps more subtle signs of struggle in your daily life or local community? Something to consider as we dive in.
And our goal throughout this deep dive is, well, simply to provide you with a clear, detailed, and balanced understanding of this really intricate U.S. economy. We'll highlight the significant, often overlooked role of business travel, while dissecting the various economic indicators and policy debates that truly shape our financial landscape.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's start with a GBTA study then. Business travel. When many of us think about the economy, our minds often jump to large, visible industries like manufacturing, maybe tech giants, or perhaps agriculture, big stuff.
Right, the usual suspects.
But business travel, as this report so powerfully puts it, is a true force for good, an often unseen engine running quietly in the background. Yet its impact is absolutely staggering and, as we'll see, intricately linked to almost every other part of our economy.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here is how comprehensively they've managed to quantify this impact. It's not just anecdotal. Think about this. In 2022 alone, global business travel spending was estimated at an immense $1.02 trillion USD. Trillion. Globally. And the U.S. actually generated a significant portion of that $421.1 billion just within the U.S. market. And looking ahead, the U.S. isn't slowing down. It's projected to remain a top market worldwide. Global business travel is anticipated to surpass $1.5 trillion in 2024.
So recovering strongly from the pandemic dip and then some?
Exactly. This isn't just a recovery. It's a demonstration of its continuing, robust, and frankly, indispensable nature. To fully appreciate this, we really need to break down its contributions piece by piece.
Okay, let's do that. Starting with the big picture. How does all that travel spending translate into the overall economic output? Our gross domestic product, or GDP.
Right, the GDP impact. In 2022, business travel generated a total of $484.4 billion in U.S. GDP.
Nearly $500 billion, just from business travel.
Just from business travel. And what's truly remarkable about this figure is the multiplier effect they found. For every single dollar spent on business travel activity, $1.15 was returned to the U.S. economy as net new GDP.
So it generates more than it costs, in effect.
Precisely. To put that into perspective, this means business travel alone was responsible for a full 1.9% of the entire U.S. GDP in 2022.
Almost 2%. That's much bigger than I would have guessed.
It surprised me too. And the report separates this total economic impact into three distinct, powerful effects. It helps to understand how it spreads. First, there's the direct impact. That accounted for $204.1 billion. This is the immediate spending with businesses that touch the traveler directly. Think airfare, hotel stays, car rentals, meals out.
Okay, so that's the money going straight to the airlines, the hotels, the restaurants we see business travelers using.
Yeah.
The obvious beneficiaries.
Exactly. But then, as you hinted, there are the less obvious but equally crucial ripples, right?
Right.
So second, we have the indirect impact. This contributed $120.8 billion. This captures the upstream benefit that flows to local suppliers of those direct businesses.
Ah, okay, so like the companies that sell food to the restaurants.
Yeah.
Or laundry services for the hotels.
Precisely. Or the software providers for travel agencies, the maintenance crews for airplanes. It's the whole ecosystem supporting those direct interactions.
I see. Makes sense. And the third one.
And finally, there's the induced impact, which was $159.5 billion. Now, this is perhaps the most far-reaching effect. It captures the impact of travel-generated wages. So the paychecks of the airline workers, the hotel staff, the restaurant servers, as they are respent by those workers throughout the broader U.S. economy.
Ah, so the flight attendant buys groceries, the hotel clerk pays rent, the taxi driver gets their car serviced.
Exactly that. They spend that money on groceries, clothing, local services, entertainment, creating another ripple of economic activity.
It's like a foundational layer then,
Yeah.
supporting jobs and spending far beyond the travel industry itself.
You could think of it like the bedrock beneath the skyscraper. Yes, it supports so much else.
That's a significant portion of the national pie, from something many might not immediately identify as a major economic driver. Impressive. But it's not just about dollars and GDP, is it? It also translates directly into jobs for millions of Americans.
Absolutely. That's maybe even more tangible for people. Beyond the GDP figures, business travel is a massive engine for job creation. It supported a total of 6 million U.S. jobs across a wide array of industry sectors in 2022.
6 million jobs.
6 million. This represents 3.5% of total U.S. employment that year. And the report emphasizes a truly striking statistic. Approximately 1 in every 26 U.S. workers actually owes their job, either directly or indirectly, to business travel.
1 in 26. That's incredible. So
Yeah.
how does that break down like the GDP numbers? Direct, indirect.
Exactly the same way. So 3.2 million of these are direct jobs. These are in industries directly supported by business travelers, transportation, accommodations, food services, the frontline roles. Then there are 1.1 million indirect jobs. These are within the business travel industry's supply chain. Again, think of those companies providing goods and services to the hotels and airlines.
Right. The suppliers, employees.
Correct. And finally, 1.6 million jobs come from induced employment, meaning jobs created by the respent wages of those direct and indirect workers throughout the economy, from local shopkeepers to service providers, teachers, you name it.
So millions of jobs supported directly and indirectly. That's a powerful story right there. But what about the income generated for these workers? Wages are, after all, crucial for consumer spending and overall economic health, affecting countless households.
Indeed. And the numbers are substantial here, too. Business traveler activity generated an estimated $291.5 billion USD in total wages and salaries in 2022.
Okay, and does that break down similarly?
It does. $129.3 billion in direct wages, $72.4 billion in indirect wages, and $89.8 billion in induced wages. The average annual wage among those direct workers serving business travelers was approximately $48,929.
Almost $49,000 on average.
Yes, and the report does note that this average is pulled down slightly by a disproportionate number of part-time employees in the sector, particularly in hospitality.
Ah, right. That makes sense for hotels and restaurants.
But it's still a substantial and vital contribution to household incomes across the country, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got GDP impact, job creation, wage generation. What about taxes? Beyond individual paychecks and broader economic output, there's often a huge, sometimes unseen benefit to government at all levels through tax revenue. This is money that funds our public services, our schools, our roads.
An enormous contribution, actually, and one that really highlights business travel's role in the nation's fiscal health. It generated an estimated $119.6 billion USD in federal, state, and local taxes in 2022.
Wow, nearly $120 billion in tax.
Yes. To put this in perspective, this constituted 1.8% of all tax collections in the U.S. that year.
Again, almost 2%. That's a consistent theme.
It is. Digging deeper, federal collections alone amounted to $60.9 billion. That's 1.2% of total federal tax collections. The largest sources within that federal chunk are personal income taxes at $19.9 billion, and social insurance taxes, things like Social Security, Medicare, which contributed $27.3 billion.
Okay. And state and local. They often rely heavily on things like sales and hotel taxes.
They certainly do. On the state and local side, business travel generated $58.6 billion. That made up a significant 3.5% of total U.S. state and local tax collections, so an even higher percentage share at the state and local level.
All right.
And you're right about the sources. The largest categorical contributors were sales taxes at $19.0 billion and property taxes, presumably from hotels and related businesses, at $18.3 billion.
That's a truly massive sum. Over $100 billion flowing into government coffers. But what does it really mean for the average person, the average household? How can we contextualize these tax numbers in a way that truly brings their impact home?
Well, the report offers some really striking comparisons to do just that. Consider this. Each single business trip, on average, generated about $281 in tax receipts.
$281 per trip.
Per trip, on average. That includes sales, excise, income taxes, the whole mix. Furthermore, for every dollar spent in the business travel industry, 28 cents goes directly to taxes of some kind.
Wow, more than a quarter of every dollar spent.
Exactly. Whether it's the sales tax on a meal, the income tax on a wage, or property taxes from a hotel. And here's a truly thought-provoking figure that underscores its importance, I think. If business travel were to suddenly disappear from the U.S. economy, poof, gone tomorrow. Each of the nation's 131.2 million households would need to pay an additional $911.62 per year in taxes just to maintain existing levels of government receipts.
Over $900 extra per family, just to fill the gap left by business travel taxes.
Precisely. So this isn't just about abstract economic growth. It's about the stable functioning of our public services, schools, roads, police, fire departments, everything.
That really drives it home.
And it raises an important question, doesn't it? Considering these undeniably significant and widespread numbers, how might public policy decisions that directly affect business travel, think infrastructure investments or changes to travel regulations, visa policies maybe, how might those have profound and far-reaching effects on our economy and on our daily lives?
Yeah, it implies that decisions impacting this sector aren't made in isolation. They could have serious ripple effects across state and federal budgets and into every community.
Absolutely. Neglecting the sector or hindering it could have serious consequences.
That's a powerful point about policy's reach. Okay, so we have a sense of the scale of the impact. Now let's get down to the brass tacks. What exactly is business travel, according to this study? And how does that massive $421.1 billion in spending actually break down into specific categories? We often have a vague idea, but the study truly drills down into the details.
Right. The study meticulously defines business travel, and it's actually broader and more nuanced than many might assume. It includes two main types of trips. First, there are transient trips. Yeah, meaning individual journeys for purposes like sales calls, client service visits, government and military travel, or even travel for construction projects or repairs, sort of one-off or regular individual trips.
Okay, individual travel.
Then there's group travel. This covers larger gatherings, conferences, conventions, group training sessions, seminars. Think industry events.
Right, meetings and conventions.
Exactly. And the scope of spending is also comprehensive. It covers domestic trips within the U.S., naturally, but also international inbound travel by foreign visitors coming here for business.
Important.
And crucially, U.S.-based spending from international outbound trips.
What does that mean exactly?
For example, when an American business person buys a ticket on a U.S. airline to travel abroad for business, that airfare counts because it's spending with a U.S. company.
I see. So the U.S. portion of international travel counts.
Correct. What's important to note, though, is what it explicitly excludes. It excludes short-distance day trips like, driving across town for a local business lunch, primarily because the data is hard to capture reliably.
Okay, so this isn't about popping down the street for a coffee meeting. It's about journeys with a significant footprint, maybe an overnight stay or a considerable travel time.
Precisely. Journeys that really engage the travel and hospitality infrastructure.
So, with that precise definition in mind, how does that $421.1 billion from 2022 actually get spent? Where does the money flow? What categories see the largest infusions?
Okay, let's look at the detailed spending breakdown for 2022. The total, as we said, $421.1 billion USD. This is split into two major components. The first and larger one is trip-related spending. This accounts for $271.6 billion, or nearly two-thirds of the total 64.5%.
Okay, two-thirds is trip-related. What's in that?
Within this, the largest categories show that direct infusion into hospitality and transportation we talked about. Lodging is the biggest chunk, $91.6 billion. Then transportation, $87.3 billion. Followed by food and beverage, $47.0 billion. Then retail, buying things while traveling, $26.5 billion. And recreation and entertainment, $18.5 billion. Taking a client out, maybe?
Right, so lodging and transport are the giants there, almost neck and neck.
They really are. And it's worth noting that domestic trip-related spending made up the bulk of this at $237.8 billion. International trip spending contributed $33.8 billion. What's striking is how diversified the spending is. It's not just air travel. Lodging and ground transportation each command nearly a quarter of all business travel dollars.
Shows its massive direct infusion into hotels, car rentals, taxis, even local transit systems.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. The hotel industry, ground transport, local restaurants would clearly see a massive benefit.
What's the second major component of that spending? You said there were two.
Right. The second major component is meetings operations expenditures. This reached $149.5 billion in 2022, making up the remaining 35.5% of the total spend.
Meetings operations. So this isn't the traveler's cost, but the cost of putting on the meeting itself.
Exactly. This category is distinct because it covers expenses associated with sponsoring meetings and conventions totally separate from the individual delegates' travel expenses we just discussed.
Okay, so the company organizing the conference pays for this stuff. Correct. And the largest categories within this show just how big that event industry is. Food and beverage for the event is the biggest, $41.1 billion. Think massive catering operations.
Huge banquets and coffee breaks.
Yep. Then entertainment, speakers, and production costs, $32.9 billion. This supports a huge creative and technical industry. AV crews, keynote speakers, decorators. Then meeting administration costs, $23.6 billion. The logistics, staffing, other meeting operations, $19.4 billion, kind of a catch-all. And finally, meeting venue rental, $12.1 billion, paying for the convention center or hotel ballroom.
Wow, that really underscores how deeply integrated business travel is, not just in hospitality, but into the entire ecosystem of event production.
From caterers to sound engineers, exactly. It underpins a vast segment of the events industry that many of us might not immediately connect to a business trip.
Okay, placing this in broader context then. The industry's recovery from the dramatic downturn of the COVID-19 pandemic seems evident in these 2022 numbers, even if not fully back yet. Business travel was one of the hardest hit sectors, but the resilience and rapid return of economic benefits seem really remarkable.
Precisely. While 2022 business travel spending, at that $421.1 billion, was still nearly 15% below its pre-pandemic peak in 2019, which stood at $493 billion.
Still a gap in 22.
Still a gap. But the estimates for 2023 painted a very different and very encouraging picture. They pointed to roughly 25% growth from 2022.
25% growth in 1 year.
That was the projection, which, if realized, would put spending around 7% above the 2019 pre-pandemic totals.
So a full recovery and then some projected for 2023.
That's what the estimate suggested. This rapid return of economic benefits alongside the sector's recovery really highlights its resilience and, frankly, its necessity. It's a testament to the enduring value of face-to-face interaction in business despite all the tech we have now.
Yeah, that's a great point. What about the sheer volume of trips and how much is spent on average per trip? This gives us a sense of scale beyond just the total dollar figures.
Good question. In 2022, a total of 429 million business trips were taken within the U.S.
Almost 430 million trips.
Yes. And the average spending per domestic trip was $632, which, interestingly, represented a 9.5% increase from 2019 levels.
So fewer trips than 2019 overall, but each trip was costing more? Inflation, maybe? Or different types of trips?
Could be a mix of both. Higher prices, maybe longer stays, or more spending on certain categories. The report doesn't specify the exact driver for the per-trip increase. It also offers a fascinating breakdown of trip purposes for 2022. 67%, so two-thirds, of U.S. business trips were for those transient business purposes, individual sales, client service, government travel.
Okay, the individual stuff.
The remaining 33%, one-third, were for group travel conferences, conventions, training. The average duration varied too. Transient trips averaged 4.1 days. Group trips were slightly shorter at 3.5 days. And business leisure trips, where people add vacation time, average 4.4 days.
Ah, the bleisure trend. People extending their trips. Makes sense.
Exactly.
That's a clear picture of how they're spending. But who exactly is the typical U.S. business traveler? What does their profile look like? Are there any surprises in their demographics or travel habits?
The report provides a really fascinating demographic profile for 2022 travelers. The average age was 44.3 years old. It breaks down pretty evenly across age groups, actually. Fewer than one-third, 29.1%, were under 35. Almost half, 46.4%, were between 35 and 54. And about a quarter, 24.5%, were over 55.
So mature workforce, mostly.
Generally, yes. Though, interestingly, group business travelers, the conference goers, tend to skew younger than those on transient trips, maybe reflecting broader participation in conventions.
Okay. What about income? Is it mostly high earners?
It's quite diverse, actually. One-third, 33.9%, had annual household incomes below $50,000. Another third, 33.4%, were between $50,000 and $100,000. And the final third, 31.5%, were above $100,000. So a pretty even spread across income brackets.
That is surprising. I might have assumed it skewed higher.
Transient business travelers do generally have higher incomes, often associated with sales or executive roles. But overall, it's broad. Gender-wise, women comprise 42.1% of conference convention travel and 36.6% of other business travel. So still a majority male, but significant female participation, especially in group travel.
And you mentioned bleisure earlier.
Right. Notably, women made up 48% of total business leisure trip volume.
Almost half.
Yes, indicating they're proportionally more likely than men to add a leisure component to their work trips. An interesting trend travel companies are watching closely.
Definitely. What about education?
Educational attainment is notably high, as you might expect for jobs requiring travel. Over 3/5, 61.8%, held a 4-year college degree or higher. That's split between 37.7% with a college degree and 24.1% with a postgraduate degree.
So, highly educated group overall. That fits.
It does.
That's a comprehensive look at who's traveling and how are they traveling and where are they typically staying. Are they hopping on planes or driving, hotels or something else?
The study also outlines their trip behavior and preferences. We touched on bleisure. Nearly two-thirds, 66.2% of business travel in 2022 was for business only, while over one-third, 33.8%, were for that combination of business and leisure. So pleisure is significant, but business only is still dominant.
Okay. And getting there. Planes, trains, automobiles.
Automobiles, surprisingly, lead the way. The personal car or truck was the most popular mode at 56.6%.
More than half driving their own car. Wow. That's be a lot of regional travel.
Likely reflects shorter distance trips, yeah. Followed by airplane at 34.6%, then rental cars at 15.2%, often used after flying in, of course, and online taxi services like Uber or Lyft at 13.1%. Trains were further down.
Interesting. And accommodation, assuming mostly hotels.
Overwhelmingly, over half, 55.4% of trips included an overnight stay. And of those overnight stays, nearly half, 47.8%, were just 1 to 2 nights. Suggests a lot of quick turnarounds.
Short trips seem common.
Very. And yes, hotels, motels, and B&Bs were the primary lodging for 76.3% of stays.
3/4 staying in traditional lodging.
Absolutely. Reinforcing the crucial role of the hotel industry in supporting business travel. This provides a very clear picture of the logistics and choices behind these millions of trips.
This national picture is compelling, but what does this all mean for different parts of the country? The report also gives us, you said, a fantastic granular look at the state-by-state economic impact. This isn't just a national phenomenon, it's deeply regional, right? Specific industries and geographic hubs benefiting enormously.
Exactly. Domestic business travel accounted for about 94% of total trip-oriented spending in 2022, so it's happening everywhere within the U.S. But as you'd expect, the majority of trips were to destinations with higher population densities and large business centers. The report found that the top 15 states accounted for over 65% of total business travel expenditures. So there is concentration in key economic hubs.
2/3 of the spending in just 15 states.
Correct. And it's critical to remember the state-level impact figures use a complex model. It's called Multiple Regional Input-Output, or MRIO analysis. This means the economic impact to one state is measured not just within its borders, but also how it ripples into other states through supply chain imports and exports.
Ah, so California's business travel might support jobs in Arizona that supply goods to California hotels.
Precisely. It demonstrates the deep interconnectedness of our national economy driven by this travel.
Okay, let's look at some illustrative examples from the top states to really ground these numbers. Starting with the biggest, California, a massive economy in its own right.
Right. California ranked first, no surprise, with a staggering $35.62 billion in total business travel spend in 2022. Domestic business travelers took 39.5 million trips within or to California.
Almost 40 million trips just for California.
Yes, and this translated into a total economic value added of $46.5 billion in new GDP for the state. That's 1.1% of California's entire GDP. It supported an impressive 483,877 jobs within California and generated $27.7 billion in wages there.
Huge numbers. Where in California mostly? LA Bay Area.
The Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim market alone accounted for over half, 50.5% of these trips. So Southern California dominates. Key industries driving this are, the big ones. Technology, agriculture, film production, healthcare, all require significant face-to-face interaction. And business travelers to California notably spend significantly more per trip, an average of $745, much higher than the national average of $632.
Higher value trips.
Seems so. California is also a major hub for group business travel. It has 6 cities in event's top 50 meeting destinations, including San Diego ranking 3rd nationally.
So diverse economy, major population centers, strong meeting infrastructure, it all adds up.
Exactly.
And what about Florida, another state often associated with tourism, but clearly a huge player in business travel too, ranking 3rd, you said.
Yes, Florida ranking 3rd with $23.26 billion in total business travel spend. It saw 31.5 million domestic business trips in 2022. This contributed $28.6 billion in new GDP to the state, representing 1.9% of its GDP.
A higher percentage of state GDP than California, so more reliant on it, perhaps.
Relatively more reliant, yes. It supported 368,142 jobs in Florida and generated $16.5 billion in wages. The Miami and Orlando markets comprise nearly 2/3 of all business trips in the state, 35.5% and 30.5% respectively.
Orlando, obviously huge for conventions.
Absolutely. Key industries include aerospace, clean tech, defense, and professional services. And Orlando itself ranked as the #1 meeting market in the entire U.S. among Survent's top 10.
#1. Wow.
It really highlights how Florida has successfully leveraged its tourism infrastructure to become a powerhouse for group business travel, not just leisure.
And then there's Texas, another economic giant, ranking 4th.
Indeed. Texas came in with $18.68 billion in total business travel spend. Domestic business travelers took 30.8 million trips there. This generated $27.6 billion in new GDP for the state, which is 1.0% of its GDP. Supported 335,651 jobs and $15.2 billion in wages.
And the hubs there, Dallas and Houston?
Predominantly. Dallas and Houston markets made up over 3/5 of business trips, with 33.3% and 27.2% respectively, highlighting their roles as major corporate and energy hubs. Key industries, energy and manufacturing, aerospace, biotechnology, corporate services, all necessitate significant business travel for sales, client relations, project management.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned Nevada earlier as an interesting case. Not in the top 5 for total spend, but high impact relative to its economy.
Exactly. Nevada's total spend was $6.02 billion, so much smaller than the others. But it ranks #1 among the top 15 markets in terms of business travel spend as a ratio to state GDP. It accounted for a striking 3.2% of Nevada's GDP.
Over 3%. That's huge reliance.
It really is. Domestic business travelers took 9.7 million trips to Nevada. This activity contributed $5.7 billion in new GDP, supported 83,926 jobs, and generated $3.5 billion in wages. And overwhelmingly, it's driven by one place. The Las Vegas Henderson Paradise market represented over 86% of business trips to the state.
Vegas. It's all about the conventions and meetings there.
Absolutely. Group business travel is the key driver. The Las Vegas Convention Center alone hosts something like 6.5 million business delegates annually.
The insights from these state snapshots really underscore how business travel, tailored to specific regional industries and event capabilities, is a foundational element of local and state economies.
Absolutely. Providing direct and indirect benefits that are both broad and deep, extending far beyond the tourism we typically associate with places like Las Vegas or Orlando.
Okay, that's a powerful and honestly often surprising picture of business travel's foundational role. Yeah. It clearly illustrates the direct, indirect, and induced impact spreading throughout the economy, a crucial, often hidden engine. But of course, the economy doesn't exist in a vacuum. Having just seen the foundational strength that business travel provides, it's crucial to understand how this fits into the broader, often perplexing U.S. economic narrative. Let's shift now to that broader U.S. economic landscape. where the data has been telling a more complex story, often filled with contradictory signals.
Right, and this really raises that important question we started with. Are we truly experiencing an economic boom, as some official narratives claim, or are there underlying challenges and mixed signals in the data? Our sources present what can only be described as a mixed reality. It's really crucial to look beyond the headlines and single talking points. Al Jazeera, for instance, reports an aggressive public relations campaign from the White House promoting economic strength, a golden age even. But their analysis of economic data often shows, as they put it, a mixed reality. And the job market in particular offers a highly nuanced picture that requires a close look.
So digging into that mixed reality, what do the latest job numbers actually tell us? Because the headlines, as you said, can be really misleading, often simplifying a complex situation.
Indeed. The latest jobs report we have data for, from July 2025, revealed a mere 73,000 jobs added.
73,000, that sounds low.
It was significantly below forecasters' expectations. They were looking for about 115,000. And this relatively low number is compounded by other, well, worrying trends. U.S. employers cut 62,075 jobs in that same month, July.
So added 73,000, cut 62,000, the net gain seems tiny.
The net gain was very small, yes. And those cuts were a 29% increase from the prior month, June, and a striking 140% higher than July of the previous year.
Cuts are accelerating then.
That's what the Challenger Gray and Christmas data suggests, yes. But what's perhaps even more concerning, or at least confusing, are the substantial downward revisions released by the Department of Labor for previous months.
The revisions. They seem to happen a lot lately.
They do. June's report was sharply revised down. It initially reported 147,000 jobs added.
Okay, decent number initially.
Revised down to just 14,000.
14,000, that's almost nothing.
A huge drop. May's report also saw a drastic downgrade from 144,000 initially reported down to only 19,000 jobs gained.
Wow, so those initial reports of moderate growth were basically wiped out later.
Pretty much. These revisions indicate that the initial picture of job growth was significantly rosier than the reality, and maybe that real-time tracking is becoming more challenging for the BLS.
That's a substantial correction.
Yep.
So where is any growth actually occurring then, if so many numbers are being revised down and cuts are increasing across many sectors?
Well, despite the overall lower growth, the additions that did happen were concentrated almost entirely in two specific areas. Healthcare added a robust 55,000 jobs, and social services added 18,000.
Okay, healthcare and social services. What about other sectors, like leisure and hospitality in the summer?
That's the surprising part. Even leisure and hospitality, typically a strong sector in peak summer months like July, showed weak growth, defying seasonal expectations. And a top economist cited in that Arconomics Reddit thread pointed out something quite stark. They noted that more than half of industries are already shedding workers.
More than half. Shedding workers.
That's the claim. And this economist said this pattern has historically been a telling sign accompanying past recessions, so raising red flags for some analysts.
Which industries specifically are shedding workers or flat?
The ones more exposed to trade policy construction, wholesale trade, manufacturing were notably flat, showing little to no growth. And government, tech, and retail sectors saw the biggest declines in employment, according to that Reddit analysis.
Tech seeing declines fits with some headlines.
Yeah.
And trade policy impact. It's an interesting link there. There's also been a lot of talk about AI and automation affecting jobs, particularly in the tech sector. Is that showing up in these numbers, or is it more of a theoretical concern at this stage?
It's certainly starting to appear, yes, although with some nuance. Recent layoffs in tech, including major companies like Recruit Holdings, Axel Springer, IBM, even Duolingo, have been explicitly attributed to AI advancements by company leaders themselves.
So companies are saying AI is replacing jobs.
Some are, yes. This aligns with research from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, from 2025 that aimed to measure this near-term automation displacement risk. But, on the other side, some Reddit users debated the extent of AI's current impact. They argued that AI cannot really replace workers wholesale yet, especially for complex multi-step tasks.
Right, maybe it helps draft an email but can't manage a whole project.
Something like that. And they pointed out its current costs can be unsustainable for a widespread implementation. Its role currently seems more in tasks like basic drafting or code correction rather than complex execution.
So it's happening, but the scale and scope were debated.
Very much so. It's a debate between the immediate capabilities and the long-term potential impact. Also, it's worth noting briefly, while employment among foreign-born workers has declined significantly by over 500,000 jobs. Claims that native-born workers are directly replacing them aren't really supported by the data. Those job losses seem driven by broader economic factors like tariffs affecting certain industries and AI, not direct labor displacement between groups.
Okay, that's an important clarification. So it sounds like job growth is happening, but in very specific, concentrated areas like healthcare. And there's a lot of debate about the underlying health and future of other sectors. This mixed reality in the job market is clear. What about wages then? And the ever-present, very real topic of inflation. For many people, their real wages, what their money can actually buy, is the ultimate measure of their economic well-being.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is how wage growth is often perceived versus the underlying reality in the data. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, the pace of wage growth has slowed recently.
So down. Okay.
But importantly, and this is a crucial point for individual consumers, wages have been outpacing inflation since 2023.
So even if wage growth slowed, it's still beating inflation.
Since 2023, yes. After a significant period following the COVID pandemic where real wages were declining because inflation was so high.
Right, I remember that period well. Prices up, wages not keeping pace.
Exactly. But that seems to have reversed. Wage growth ticked up by 0.3% in July from the month prior and is up 3.9% compared to this time last year. With inflation lower than that, real wages are rising. That's a crucial metric for individual consumers and their purchasing power.
Okay, that's a positive sign, definitely.
Though it's worth noting, the Al Jazeera piece pointed out a narrative comparing blue-collar wage growth under the current administration positively to the previous one. But context matters. The current administration inherited what they called unquestionably the strongest economy in decades, largely due to the impressive recovery from COVID-19 already underway.
Right, so the starting points for comparison are very different. Always need context.
Always.
That's reassuring that wages are outpacing inflation, offering maybe a bit more breathing room for households. But how is inflation itself looking? We hear a lot about prices at the grocery store, and they certainly feel higher sometimes.
Well, the overall consumer price index, the CPI, was at 2.7% in June. That's the headline inflation number. Core inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy prices, was slightly higher at 2.9% in the most recent report.
So below 3%, that's much lower than it was.
Much lower, yes. But when we look at specifics, grocery prices were indeed up 2.4% year over year, so still rising, just slower than before. For example, fruits and vegetables were up 0.9%, coffee up 2.2%, beef up 2%. Small increases, but noticeable.
And what about those specific claims? Al Jazeera mentioned egg prices.
Right, that was a strange one. The report highlighted claims of a 400% drop in egg prices, which, as you know, is mathematically impossible. A 100% drop means they're free.
Right, so what actually happened?
The reality, according to the data, is that average egg prices really surged to $6.23 a dozen by March 2025.
Over $6. Why?
Primarily due to an avian flu outbreak that severely impacted supply. Classic supply shock. They then fell back down to $3.38 a dozen as supply recovered.
Okay, so a big drop from the peak, but not 400%, and starting to an artificially high price.
Exactly. It was a 32% drop since January and 46% from their peak, driven primarily by supply and demand dynamics, not specific policy interventions. Similarly, claims of gas prices being $1.98 a gallon were found to be untrue. The cheapest gas in any state, which was Mississippi, was $2.70 a gallon. The national average was $3.15 a gallon, according to AAA data.
So again, the specific claims didn't match the verifiable data. It highlights the importance of checking sources.
Absolutely. Scrutinizing specific claims against the data is key.
Beyond prices and wages, what are the big picture indicators like GDP telling us about the economy's direction, especially regarding business investment, which is often seen as a key signal for future growth?
Right, GDP. While the Q2 U.S. GDP grew at a 3% annualized rate, which surpassed expectations.
Sounds good on the surface.
It does. But the Al Jazeera report characterized this as a combination of factors. Partly a rebound after a weak first quarter, partly a boost from a drop in imports, which technically helps the GDP calculation, and only a modest rise in actual consumer spending.
So the headline number might look strong, but the underlying reasons need a closer look.
Exactly. And what's concerning are some of those underlying signals within the GDP report. Private sector investment fell sharply by 15.6%.
15% drop in investment. That seems significant.
It is, and inventories of goods and services declined by 3.2%. Both of these are often seen as indicators of a potential slowdown, as businesses are not investing as much in future production or are holding fewer goods, perhaps anticipating weaker demand.
Okay, warning signs there. What about manufacturing?
Manufacturing growth in non-durable goods also slowed down a 1.3% increase compared to 2.3% in the prior quarter. And auto manufacturing actually fell by 2.6%, partly due, Al Jazeera suggests, to dampened demand resulting from tariffs on imported parts or materials.
So while the headline GDP number might suggest strength, a deeper look reveals some areas of fragility and caution, particularly in investment and manufacturing.
That seems to be the takeaway, yes. A mixed picture, again.
Stepping back for a moment, policy decisions often cast long shadows over economic data, and our sources highlight some significant debates around government actions that may be accelerating economic shifts, sometimes with real-world, tangible consequences for consumers and businesses.
Exactly. The discussions really delve into how specific policy choices, particularly around trade and, interestingly, the very integrity of economic data, are perceived to be impacting the economy, and sometimes with profound implications that extend far beyond the immediate headlines. This calls for critical thinking about the why behind the numbers we're seeing.
Let's start with trade policy. Tariffs have been a big topic.
They have. Bloomberg reports quite directly that the White House has successfully dismantled the post-war trading system, strong words, and moved the U.S. into a new regime of discriminatory tariffs and managed trade.
Dismantled the post-war system.
Yeah.
Why?
That's their assessment of the shift away from multilateral free trade agreements. This is manifested in things like a 10% blanket tariff implemented in April, which is on top of existing levies on specific goods like steel and cars. Furthermore, promises made earlier of 90 trade deals in 90 days were largely unmet. Only a few comparable deals were announced, like ones with the UK and the European Union, and the EU one still requires parliamentary approval there.
So a shift towards tariffs and away from broad trade deals.
That appears to be the strategy, yes.
And what's the actual economic impact of these tariffs? We touched on manufacturing maybe being affected. Are they achieving their stated goals, or are there unintended consequences, particularly for consumers?
Well, this is where the analysis gets critical. Al Jazeera explicitly states that tariffs do not primarily pressure foreign exporters, despite sometimes being framed that way.
Okay. Who pays them then?
Instead, Al Jazeera says they are paid by U.S. importers and ultimately are likely to be passed on to U.S. consumers.
So the cost lands here, not abroad.
That's the crucial distinction they make. And we're seeing evidence of this. Companies like Walmart, Mattel, Ford have already announced price hikes as a direct result of these tariffs, demonstrating this pass-through effect.
So consumers end up paying more.
That's the likely outcome. While tariffs have generated over $100 billion in revenue for the federal government.
That's a lot of revenue.
It is, but the cost of imports for consumers has, according to Al Jazeera, only risen about 3% so far. But many economists expect that to change as these import taxes are more fully passed on over time.
Okay. And how are other countries reacting?
In response to these protectionist policies, some countries have even pivoted their trade policies away from the U.S. Brazil and Mexico, for example, announced a new trade pact specifically mentioning the changing U.S. stance. It highlights the global ripple effect and a potential reshaping of international trade alliances.
Interesting. So tariffs raise costs for U.S. consumers and potentially push trading partners away. This raises an important question. If tariffs are directly passed to consumers, what does that mean for their disposable income and spending power, especially at a time when they're already dealing with inflation, even if it's lower now?
It definitely puts additional pressure on household budgets, potentially counteracting some of the gains from wages outpacing general inflation.
Right. And speaking of trust in policy, there's been significant discussion you mentioned about explicit attacks on official economic data agencies. This could have even broader, more unsettling implications for public confidence, couldn't it?
What's truly fascinating here, and frankly deeply concerning to economists, is the potential for undermining trust in the very numbers we rely on to assess economic health and make informed decisions. Bloomberg highlights recent explicit attacks on both the Federal Reserve's operational independence and the integrity of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, which gives us the jobs report.
Attacking the Fed and the BLS. How so?
On the Federal Reserve, or the Fed, Bloomberg reports unwarranted attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, including drumming up accusations of impropriety over a headquarters renovation project, seemingly to create pressure. Bloomberg also points to the appointment of a key figure, Stephen Mirren, who they identify with what they call Trumpist heterodoxy, meaning unconventional economic views challenging traditional norms to a temporary position on the Fed's board. They suggest this is happening while the search for a suitably compliant successor to Powell proceeds.
So trying to influence Fed leadership and policy.
That's Bloomberg's interpretation. They argue that installing a servant at the Fed, someone politically aligned rather than independent, would likely paradoxically push market-driven rates higher.
Higher? Why?
Because markets value the Fed's independence. If markets perceive the Fed as being politically influenced, they lose confidence, demand higher risk premiums, and long-term rates like mortgage rates could actually go up, even if the Fed lowers its policy rate.
Loss of credibility has a cost.
Exactly. Bloomberg calls it a strategy that is all risk and no return.
And the BLS, the agency that gives us the jobs report, has also been directly targeted. That seems like a direct attack on the integrity of our economic information itself.
Yes, that's correct. According to Bloomberg, the president fired the head of the BLS, Erica McNartver,
Fired the head of the BLS. Why?
alleging she rigged the July jobs figures, specifically citing those unusually big downward revisions for May and June we discussed earlier.
So blaming her for the bad revisions.
Essentially, yes. However, Bloomberg counters that it's hard to see how McIntyre could have rigged the numbers. They explain that revisions are a normal, standard statistical practice, especially when sectoral labor demands are shifting rapidly, as they are now due to factors like tariffs and immigration crackdowns, and also when the agency itself is short on data-gathering resources, which can lead to larger revisions initially.
So revisions are normal, maybe larger now due to circumstances, but not necessarily rigged.
That's Bloomberg's argument. Furthermore, they point out the administration also dismantled a panel of unpaid technical experts. These experts were specifically responsible for advising the BLS on improving its methods and helping to keep revisions small and transparent.
They got rid of the expert panel that helps make the numbers better.
According to Bloomberg, yes. They argue this move makes the revision process less clear and potentially more susceptible to suspicion, ironically.
So what are the broader implications of these attacks on the perceived objectivity of our economic data and institutions? This goes beyond just a single jobs report, doesn't it?
The broader implications are indeed significant and potentially destabilizing for markets and the economy. Planting the suspicion that employment and inflation numbers might be manipulated would, as Bloomberg puts it, add a further premium to long-term interest rates.
Again, higher borrowing costs due to uncertainty.
Exactly. Investors would demand higher returns on bonds and other investments to compensate for perceived political risk and data uncertainty. This raises borrowing costs across the economy for mortgages, business loans, everything. It also increases the risk of a Trump moment for financial markets, according to Bloomberg.
A Trump moment, meaning
They seem to be referring to sudden market volatility triggered by unexpected political actions or statements, similar to some events during the previous administration. The analysis suggests there's no clear short-term political benefit to these actions beyond dominating news headlines, while potentially creating significant long-term instability in financial markets.
it's clear there's a delicate and crucial balance between policy decisions and maintaining market confidence and institutional integrity. Undermining trust in foundational economic data could have profound and lasting negative effects.
Absolutely. It's a cornerstone of a stable market economy.
Okay, that leads us to the larger ongoing debates about whether the U.S. is truly heading into a recession, given all these mixed signals and policy shifts, and also the long-term impacts of macro trends like automation and demographic shifts. These are the big questions that weigh on people's minds and influence their daily decisions.
Right. And placing this in broader context, those Arconomics Reddit discussions vividly reflect both the public anxiety around this and the conflicting views even among economists. Some argue strongly that the fact that more than half of industries are already shedding workers is a very telling sign that has historically accompanied recessions.
It's historical precedent argument.
Exactly. They point to the substantial downward job report revisions we discussed, and also tapering domestic travel and plummeting international travel reported in some areas as significant warning signs. One Redditor made a compelling point about job concentration. They noted that job growth over the last 3 years has been primarily concentrated in just a few sectors: healthcare, mostly nursing home staff, home health aides, leisure and hospitality, bars, restaurants, resorts, and government jobs.
Okay, the big three drivers recently.
Right. But with leisure and hospitality already showing signs of decline, and government jobs having taken a hit recently, some argue that if only healthcare is left driving growth, it creates a potentially unstable and unbalanced economic situation, too reliant on one sector.
So on one side, there's a strong case being made for a heightened recession risk based on job shedding, revisions, and concentration. But what about the arguments for a soft landing or continued economic growth, which we also hear about? How do those perspectives counter these concerns?
Well, other Reddit users and also the Al Jazeera source to some extent point to the still historically low unemployment rates near 4.2% and consistent consumer spending as evidence that the economy has perhaps narrowly avoided a recession or achieved that elusive soft landing.
The resilience argument.
Yes. A report from the National Retail Federation, the NRF, was cited on Reddit, stating that consumer spending for July was solid. And as we discussed, the fact that wages are growing above the rate of inflation is a key factor in keeping the economy afloat and consumer confidence relatively stable.
People still have money and are spending it, basically.
That's the core argument. It's also noted that the U.S. economy recovered impressively from COVID-19, much faster than many expected, leading some to argue that perhaps previous recession warnings were actually necessary to prompt actions, like from the Fed, that ultimately averted a deeper downturn, suggesting proactive measures worked, rather than indicating a lack of underlying strength.
An interesting take. The warnings help prevent the thing they warned about.
Potentially, yes. It's hard to prove counterfactuals, but it's a valid perspective.
And how does our initial topic, business travel, which we just explored as a powerful hidden engine, fit into this ongoing recession debate? Could its recovery or potential slowdown swing the balance?
That's a great connection back. The GBTA study we discussed really reinforces the sensitivity of the broader economy to business travel fluctuations. It provides that direct numerical link. For every 1% growth in business travel expenditures, the U.S. economy gains nearly 60,000 jobs, $2.9 billion in paid wages, $1.2 billion in tax revenue, and $4.8 billion in new GDP.
So it has a leveraged impact.
Highly leveraged. This factor highlights how any significant shift, either positive or negative, in business travel activity could definitely swing the balance in the broader economic picture. If it contracts significantly again, those recessionary pressures from other sectors will be amplified. Conversely, if it continues its strong recovery trajectory as projected for 2023, it provides a powerful counterforce, injecting vitality and stability into the economy. Its resilience is a key economic variable to watch.
Makes sense. Beyond the immediate recession debate, there's a lot of discussion about long-term trends shaping our economy, especially demographic shifts and the evolving role of the healthcare industry. It seems like healthcare is a significant outlier in terms of consistent job growth.
Absolutely. As we noted, job growth over the last 3 years has been heavily concentrated there, particularly nursing home staff and home health aides, alongside leisure hospitality and government. Many Reddit users attribute healthcare's sustained growth primarily to demographics specifically, an aging population. They note, demographics is destiny.
The baby boomers aging into higher healthcare needs.
Exactly. This implies that the demand for healthcare services will inevitably continue to rise as that large generation ages, creating a fundamental long-term driver for this sector, almost regardless of other economic cycles.
But is that growth sustainable? Are the jobs good jobs?
That's the big question. Despite this strong job growth in numbers, there are significant sustainability concerns within the sector itself, highlighted on Reddit. Users noted that healthcare workers have seen their wages stagnate in real terms, and understaffing is also a serious problem, which leads to widespread burnout among these essential workers.
Growth in jobs, but strain on the workers.
Seems to be the case. One medical student even commented on physician salaries being down 25% adjusted for inflation amidst rising school costs. It paints a picture of a strained essential sector that might be growing in sheer number of jobs, but is struggling internally.
And what about the intersection of healthcare and automation? We touched on AI earlier. Can technology alleviate some of these pressures on the healthcare system, or might it pose new challenges for healthcare workers?
The Reddit thread included a really lively debate on exactly that. Can automation truly help alleviate future healthcare demands? Some users argued quite strongly against it, saying things like, you cannot automate healthcare. Not now, at least. A robot nurse will, on average, be worse than a human one.
The human touch argument.
Yes, and pointing out that patients are already expressing frustration with automated systems in other contexts, like customer service helplines. They questioned if support staff can truly be replaced by robots, especially for tasks requiring empathy, complex decision-making, and direct human interaction.
But others see potential.
Others question how advancements in medicine itself, like the new generation of weight loss drugs, might actually reduce future healthcare needs for an aging population.
So medical breakthroughs could change the demand curve, lessening the need for automation.
Implicitly, yes, suggesting that medical innovation could change the demand for healthcare services in unexpected ways, perhaps more effectively than automation in some areas. This touches on that SHRM research we mentioned earlier, exploring worker exposure to automation risk, and highlights the ongoing tension between technological advancement and human labor, especially in critical relationship-driven sectors like healthcare.
A dynamic tension between efficiency and human need. Fascinating. Wow. What a deep dive into the complex tapestry of the U.S. economy. From the undeniable ripple effect of business travel, a true hidden engine, to the nuanced, sometimes contradictory signals from job reports and GDP figures, and the spirited debates around policy and the future. It's clear there's no single simple answer, is there?
Not at all. The economic landscape is dynamic, shaped by countless interacting forces.
Knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied, as you said.
Exactly. And we've seen today how business travel is a significant, measurable force for economic good, contributing hundreds of billions to GDP, millions of jobs, billions in taxes. It's a foundational layer.
Definitely established that.
But we've also unpacked the ongoing shifts in the broader economy, where specific sector growth, particularly in healthcare driven by demographics, coexists with job shedding elsewhere. And the narrative around key indicators like inflation and GDP is often contested, influenced by both direct policy decisions like tariffs and external factors like avian flu outbreaks or the accelerating pace of technological change.
It really is about critical thinking, isn't it? Understanding that economic realities are shaped by countless factors, from individual spending habits and the value we still place on face-to-face interaction, to global trade policies, and even how official data is presented and sometimes perceived. The sources we explored today really underscore that complexity and the importance of looking beyond the headlines and single talking points.
Precisely. The interplay between all these forces shapes our economic future. It's not just about the numbers themselves, but the context, the connections, and the implications for everyday life and for the bigger picture of national prosperity and stability. It's about recognizing the hidden engines, like business travel, understanding the mixed signals in the data, and grappling with the long-term trends that are quietly reshaping our world.
So thinking about those connections and implications, maybe a final thought for our listeners to mull over.
Okay. Considering the immense yet often unseen economic impact of business travel that we detailed, and the current debates around automation, AI, and shifting industries, how might a future where virtual interactions truly dominate, or where AI significantly alters workforce dynamics, how might that fundamentally reshape the very foundations of our urban centers and state economies, especially those places like Orlando, Las Vegas, even major cities like New York or LA that currently rely so heavily on that human connection and physical movement for conventions, meetings, and business deals?
Right. Will cities, built around business districts and convention centers, need to fundamentally adapt? And what will that mean for the millions of jobs that business travel currently supports, both directly and indirectly?
A profound question for the future shape of our economy and our communities.
Something profound indeed to chew on as we navigate the evolving economic landscape. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the U.S. economy. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and perhaps a little more curious about the economic forces shaping our world. Until next time.